Before we get started, just a quick note, spoiler alert.
And we are adults, and I will try very hard not to use adult language, but this is the warning.
Hello and welcome to Fright Bites. My name is Jennifer.
And I'm Sedina. Each episode, we will feature a short story or novella. You can read along with us by finding the full reading list posted on our website, lastlibraryonTheLeft.com, or our social media at LLOTL Podcast.
Today we are continuing coverage of the Green Hollow duology with the second book in the series, Drowned Country by Emily Tesh. It was published in 2020 by Tor.com, and here's the official summary. The second volume of the Green Hollow duology once again invites readers to lose themselves in the story of Henry and Tobias. Even the wild man of Green Hollow can't ignore a summons from his mother, when that mother is the indomitable Adela Silver, practical folklorist. Folklorist? Folklorist.
Yep.
Henry Silver does not relish what he'll find in the grimy seaside of Rothport, where once the ancient wood extended before it was drowned beneath the sea. A missing girl, a monster on the loose, or worst of all, Tobias Finch, who loves him. That's a fun little summary.
Yeah, I feel like it covered everything.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I was happy with the way the first book ended, but I didn't know that I needed the second book.
Yes. Starting it off, though, my very first note was reading Silver's POV is fun, but really frustrating when you come out of Tobias, who is so much more intuitive and observant. And Silver is so in his head. Just, he's so dippy, you know? Like he's,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Sulked a lot in this book.
Sulked, yes. And that was my next note, was that I was like, God, he's such a riot. He's all mopey and I'm the master of my house, demigod, not mere mortal. Tremble before me in my wood. And then Bramble comes in and tells him his mom is back. And he's like, okay, but like I made a mess in this house and what is she gonna think?
Silver. So I really liked, like you said, in our previous recording, I loved Silver in the first book, Silver in the Wood. And in this one, I just liked him a little bit less. I guess because we got from his perspective, he wasn't as entertaining and as lovable as before, which, okay, character flaw. But I love Tobias even more. Love Mrs. Silver even more.
Yeah, you come to appreciate Tobias's patience with the man he loves much more.
Yeah. I kind of question why Tobias loves him, but I'm like, you know what, Tobias, you do you, friend.
Yeah, like, okay. This takes place a long time ago. It's like out gay men probably weren't particular. I don't know. And the last gay man he was with was Fabian, so
this is definitely a glow up.
Yeah, right. And even saying that, my first character note for Silver is that he's the most juvenile, basic gaby I've ever read.
Oh my gosh, he is.
Right? He's like petulant and he denies himself as self-punishment when like there was Silver, just calm down. Why can't you just talk to people, Silver?
Yeah. And I get his avoidance with his mom, but friend.
But his avoidance with Tobias, bro, he was not dumping. Oh my God.
His avoidance with everyone and everything and the unwillingness to move forward. I was like, oh my God, I could wring your little neck.
Yeah, that was the thing too, is that Bramble did not ask for this man. And then she was stuck with a lovesick Silver and Tobias. And then when Tobias and Adela left to monster hunt, she was stuck with a petulant, tantrum-throwing Silver who had control over the literal wood and earth around him. Yeah. So he trashed his house. He threw the biggest tantrum in the world, but it harmed the wood because it was forcing it to grow and to, Silver.
He was so frustrating in this book.
And his mom called him out on his tantrum right away. She was like, oh, so this is what you were doing with your time?
He doesn't hold back.
She does not care about his sensitive gay feelings.
No, she doesn't, which is the best for him. He needed that.
Yes.
One of the things that I wrote was I didn't think that there could be more character development from what we had gotten in the first book. But what we did get was just far beyond my expectations. We were introduced to a couple new characters. Well, technically one main character, Maud.
We just got to see more of Adela.
Yeah. And they had like a little fairy in there and then the fairy queen.
The Fae Queen, for sure, you get but that's clearly the antagonist.
Mhm.
You know what I really like too about Emily Tesh's writing is that the antagonist, it's not that they're held out until the end. I mean, they are, but it doesn't feel abrupt and they don't
No.
feel one-dimensional.
Yeah, they're not one dimensional by any means. I really, really love her writing style because, yes, they're going to try to find this fairy queen because Maud wants to. But at the same time, I feel like they are their own antagonists too in their own way. And the way she wrote it and the way she wrote the Fae Queen, I don't know, it was just so fun to read. And like you said, it wasn't one dimensional. I think you could pull out the Fae Queen and give her her own story and I would read it too. You know what I'm saying? Like all the stories, just the way she writes is just incredible.
Yeah. But of course, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Basically, Adela came back and was like, hey, Tobias and I have come across a problem that we need your help with. We can only do this with you. And she made it kind of sound like he would be quintessential to the hunt. And you're like, okay, cool. Like, this is good for him. And they get to Rothport and there's a missing woman and there's a vampire in that village. And he's like, all right, cool. So, like, what are my special skills? And she's like, you're pretty. I was like, wait, what? All that she brought him for. She was like, yeah, apparently the vampire likes pretty boys, which like was Fabian's shtick too. So she's like, yeah, you're just bait again. And he had no problem with it, was just manipulating him. And wow, it just the other thing too about them being reunited, him and Tobias, is that up until they reunited, you felt that their relationship was damaged beyond repair.
Yeah.
Because Silver's acting like it's the end of the world, he'll never love again.
Yeah.
And it turns out that he fucked up bad by withholding information from Tobias, and Tobias felt that he had been manipulated, which is fair. Fabian. And so he left to go do his monster hunting thing. And Silver took that as, I hate you, I'm never coming back, because he's a petulant gaby. And what it really was Tobias going, you're not going to hold me here. You're not going to control me like Fabian. I still love you, but I'm going to go do my own thing. To me, it was clear, even through Silver's POV, that Tobias still cared for him deeply and that he still wanted to be with him and protect him and be there for him if Silver would get out of his own ass and let him.
Yeah, you know, let's just say for argument's sake that Silver decided to fix himself and like swallow his pride and go back to him. Agreed. I think that Tobias would have been like, see, this is all that I wanted. For me, it was Tobias realizing that there were never any boundaries with Fabian, and he's clearly setting one here. But I did kind of secretly love that he's like, I like your mom better.
Yeah.
Like, just to throw that little jab in there.
Tobias and Adela got along so well. Good too for Tobias to not be so infatuated with Silver, to kind of see him throw that tantrum, juvenile aspects of him.
Yeah.
So that he could mature with the wood. He matured in his wood deity type level stuff. Okay, one scene that I really loved, that before it gets into the like kind of spooky Maud vampire fairy stuff, is that they're out over the ocean and Silver is kind of feeling where the wood used to be, which was the drowned country. Silver can only travel as far as the wood that he inhabits used to exist. And so he can feel where the wood used to be in time. Him and Tobias are talking, and he has this moment where he blushes and he gets really embarrassed by Tobias, and flowers spring up everywhere. And I was like, you poor thing, you can't even hide your like feelings. The wood literally went, look, I'm embarrassed. I'm in love. So cute.
It was so cute. This one had, to me, the first one was more fantasy based, but Drowned Country to me was a bit more romantic at parts. And I was just like, flowers and roses and daisies.
Literally.
Yeah.
So they go to find Maud, and it turns out that Maud, she knew about the vampire the whole time. The whole city probably did, because the guy was a founder of Rothport and then just impersonated, ironically, the local priest.
That was so weird. I was like, I choose to read over this.
That. Strange. And like never changed either. His portrait was everywhere. And I was like, what? Okay.
Alrighty, friend.
Yeah. And he did prey on, pretty men or whatever. But Maud eventually gets to the point where she's like, I'm going to become a monster hunter. She's been in touch with folklorists around the world, and she's going to be a monster hunter. And her first kill is going to be the vampire. So she takes out the vampire, and that's where they find her, is in the vampire's lair under the church. And they're like, all right, cool. So, well, now that we found you, we're going to take you back home. And she's like, I'm not going home. I'm going to go to fairy country. And they're like, what? And it turns out that that story that Tobias told in the first book about he only saw a fairy once
Yeah.
and it had kidnapped a child and tried taking it across to the fairy world, but the child came back. And so he dropped her off back in the village. And it turns out Maud was that child. Maud recognizes Tobias and so Tobias, when he finds out that Maud was that little girl that he first saw, this was the one thing I didn't like about Tobias in this book, was that he became really dismissive of Maud and her plans to go to fairy country. Because he was like, oh, that explains why you're not being a good little girl.
Yeah.
Is that you're fairy mad?
Yeah.
And he was like, you don't understand what's happened to you and you're just crazy. And I was like, fuck you a little, Tobias.
Yeah. I was so mad. I was like, how dismissive of a child and
a woman. Yeah.
I liked you. Why'd you do that?
Right. I think it was right about there in the book where I was like, okay, fuck you a little, Tobias. Because then Silver was like, wait, you've got plans and books and a history and like, yeah, let's go to fairy country. And I was like, okay, maybe not the smartest plan, but at least you're there for her in her reality, you know?
I liked their little argument about whose name goes first when they write a paper together.
So they decide to go. Silver figures out that because he can feel the wood on a level that exists outside of time and space, that is probably where the fairy doorway exists. Because the fae, the one time that Tobias felt it, it was a weird ripple or whatever in reality. So they use Silver's powers to enter the forest as it was, but under the ocean. Weird and complicated, but cool.
Yeah.
And they enter the fairy country, and immediately the fairy country is playing games with them.
Yeah.
And they find their way to the kingdom, but the little fairy that had kidnapped Maud before is there, and he's taken Maud again, and he's put the fairy queen is existing, like her presence, her entity is existing in this mask.
Yeah, it's a mask made out of, I guess, fairy skin.
Yeah, Silver called it a death mask.
Yeah, and Maud has to put it on, and when she puts it on, she's sort of trapped by the fairy queen who is speaking through her through the mask, which is very, very disturbing.
Yeah, it was frightening because Maud wanted to be a part of it, and so she agreed in a way, but I feel like it was sort of like the Witches of Lichford, where Autumn was compelled. You know, there wasn't a real choice of will, and I feel like Maud was compelled. She was manipulated. There was no real will there.
Yeah, okay, and this is probably because I've been watching a lot of Vampire Diaries, but it reminded me of the obsession that comes with vampire lore and wanting to meet a vampire and then having a vampire bite you that you don't necessarily want them to bite you. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
I felt that way, but then that part was really scary to me, so I kept thinking about Jim Carrey's The Mask.
Yes, me too.
Feel better.
Yeah. The only other thing that I really liked about this, well, I mean, I loved this book, don't get me wrong.
Love it.
But the only other note that I have was that I thought it was interesting that they brought in the Green Man mythology, the Jack spirit. So like the Jack of the Wood, Little Boy Green. The Jack spirit is, if you ever read the Fables comic book, or you ever think about all the different nursery rhymes that have, you know, Jack be nimble, Jack and Jill, Jack is a Jack spirit that occurs, Jack Frost, things like that. He's the same thing.
Oh, okay.
And that's why I believe the queen calls Silver a Jack spirit.
I think so.
Or she calls him Jack of the Wood. And I thought that was cool that Emily brought in that like idea of the Jack spirit.
I will say that without having knowledge of the Green Man and the Jack spirit, I feel like she did a great job explaining this lore to someone who has no knowledge of it. Because I don't feel like I missed anything. And I feel like any education I do after this will just be like ice cream on top of the cake or on top of the brownie, if you will. I really love the way she writes.
Yes, I do too. I think I liked the ending more than in Silver in the Wood. I liked that Silver himself grew from his experiences, even though he still kind of sulked even in the end.
Yeah.
I wrote down, he went from I'm an immortal being and no one understands my angst to I'm potentially going to outlive eternity and there's worse eternities to outlive than the Hallow Wood, which was like massive growth because he saw what became of the fairy queen in her eternity.
I think it really woke him up.
Yeah, they just, can you defeat the fairy? I don't know, because they just took off the map. Anyway, whatever. They leave the fairy country behind and they come back and they've kind of worked out out that Maud will be a monster hunter with them.
Working with Miss Silver, yeah.
She'll
I like how
learn from Adela.
I like how Silver's like, yes, you need to work with her female companionship. And then Tobias is like, I agree. And she's like, well, if you both say so.
Yeah, like she's not ecstatic that they're not going to return her to her parents.
Yeah.
And that Silver and Tobias reconcile, that they have this nice opportunity to experience life. So I got a little ahead of myself. They get back to the wood and they find a compromise with the little fairy guy that kidnapped Maud initially. He kind of comes out of nowhere at the end. He's like, let me take over the wood. I'm going to be immortal anyway. Let me take over the wood and then you can have your humanity back. And I was like, that's
he's like set to being alone too, right?
I was like, that's so nice to have the fairy come back because he was used to servitude anyway. The wood is a better master to serve. And I was like, that's nice that this ended so sweetly. And just, I love this idea of this little ragtag group of Silver and Tobias and Adela and Maud out there on shenanigans, monster hunting. And so cute.
It was really, really cute. The only quote that I wrote down, because I am a weirdo, is, why am I Tobias? Because I say things when I am in relationships, I say the weird things like Tobias said to Silver, I just like to hear you talk. I say things like that. And I say those when I'm really close with friends too, like just weird random things. And I'm like, why are you saying this? Like, you know better.
Yeah, but it's sweet because he said it when I think Silver was like, well, I can teach you to read. And Tobias was like, because he was reading to him in bed. And Tobias was like, I just like to hear your voice. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. So sweet. I just love Tobias. I really do. He was a bit of a jerk, but I still like him.
I don't think he was much of he was really only a jerk to Maud. The fact that he dismissed her for being fairy mad kind of made me mad.
I was just like, that's not what I've expected from you, sir. You know what I mean? Like, I was kind of disappointed.
Same.
That part just kind of irked me a little bit, but I understand that we were getting different sides of them, so it is what it is. But I still just overly loved this series. I loved in the end how Tobias was willing to go back to loneliness and servitude of the wood because he'd already done it, even though he'd already experienced freedom and like doing his own thing. I also liked that even though Silver was resigned to being in the hollow man, hollow woods. I don't.
Yeah, he was going to be the Hollowwood, the Green Man.
Oh my God, the Hollowwood Green Man. Even though he was resigned to that, he still like took care of his books.
Yeah,
like those kind of things were like really nice because I feel like he was willing to lose most of himself but keep the best parts. I liked his growth. It wasn't that much, but there was some growth.
I mean, when the bar is set so low.
He was so silly, and so there was a touch of narcissism in him. Just a touch. I would say highly recommend these two. If you don't read anything out of the list, no, you should read a lot of the list.
Yes, you should be reading a lot of the list.
Yeah, but these two for sure. Especially, listen, I am reading right now, Your House is on Fire, Your Children Are All Gone, and that one is a doozy. So if you need this after that, do so.
That's fair. I definitely have a couple of hard ones on there. And we'll see you guys again soon.
Yes, we'll see y'all tomorrow for another review.
Yay. All right,
bye.
Bye. If you liked listening to us ramble on about horror, subscribe to our podcast and tell your friends. And if you would like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram or Facebook at LLOTL Podcast.
Check out our website by going to lastlibraryontheleft.com. Be sure to visit our About Us page to discover our 2 truths and a lie. Or, if you'd like to send us an email, you can reach us at somethingwicked@lastlibraryontheleft.com.